Yeah, well, I can see myself now without any technical info. Hello, everybody. Just checking my audio. If everyone could just give me a thumbs up in the feed, the top chat there, or say yes, just to see if my audio is okay. And we'll kick off in just a moment. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, good evening, everybody. Just wait for a few more to arrive, and then we'll kick off. Live plant doctor question and answer. No question unanswered, hopefully. No, there's no such thing as silly questions, only silly answers. So I hope you enjoy this evening. And brilliant. Thank you, Stephen. Nice to see you. What we'll do this evening is perhaps for about 40 minutes or so, I'll answer some of your questions that you've already posed on the app. And you're welcome to ask me anything here as well. Probably best to put that in the chat box on YouTube, but you can also do it on Iris if you prefer. I believe it's easier to, if you're in now and you've posted okay, that'll be the best spot for me to see them. Hopefully you're curious about the plant doctors, and maybe this will allow you to put a face to the name. We're here. I'm part of a small team. I'm really just the tip of the pyramid. There's a nice small core team, very talented people behind me. With let me see if I can embarrass them by saying there's probably over 50 years of botanical, RHS, National Trust, and commercial horticultural experience behind us on Iris. And I think Iris is entering it's 73 years old. It's entering its 4th year, and it started off quite as a little humble thing, and now has sort of grown with your support and your membership into quite a community, and it's lovely to be part of that. And what we'll do is we'll ask for your feedback on that at the end of the event as well. See if you'd like to see more of these, see if they're useful. But we really enjoy seeing all of your posts, and we read every single one of them. And it's a pleasure to sort of have such a supportive. The app originally was designed to be a very supportive, safe environment for people, like-minded people that are into plants and gardens, really. And we weren't looking for the Instagram version of horticulture or gardening, but we wanted to create our own little sort of mini community that people felt happy and safe to be in and ask questions, all built around the core functionality, of course, of the Plant ID app section of the app, which obviously was one of the primary tools in the app. And we've sort of developed, with your feedback, better quality pictures, the way you process pictures to things, and we hear you. And it's my job to sort of relay that to our developers and see if we can find a happy mix of community and functionality for you as well. But it's a real pleasure to be here tonight to answer some of your questions. So if we're all okay, just a little bit about my role. As you're probably aware, I look after you and support you on the app, but I also provide technical expertise as part of a core team. And that can be sort of botanical or horticultural or plant pathological. And so you'll see some of the articles that we've written. And in the background, we sort of work with our sort of business interests as well, the companies that fund Iris as well. And so with that, I think we'll kick off with a few questions that we have already been asked. If you'd like to ask a question in the meantime, have a look there's a link that we've been posting in the chat box there, and that will be the easiest way to get in touch with us. As I say, any question you like on horticulture, we'll do our best to answer it, or I'll do my best to answer it. And if you prefer to be anonymous, that's absolutely fine as well. Just saying, I won't say your name. Okay. So D ladders. Hopefully you're here, D ladders. We love some of these names. We really do. Houseplant Doctors. Is it too early to prune back a non-evergreen magnolia yet? I want to do it before, so I can see what branches need removing before it's in full leaf. So yeah, I see your dilemma. They can be a little bit wayward and thicket growing plants, lovely deciduous shrubs with very impressive coloured flowers this time of year, the deciduous varieties. Unfortunately, I would probably defer that, if you want the honest answer, to sort of July to late September. Magnolias tend to bleed quite heavily with sap, and this tends to be, at this time of year, a problem as the sap is rising, and it tends to hinder wound sealing, which is an entry point for disease, or could be an entry point for disease. So generally, I'd be only advising that you'd remove what we call the 3Ds, which is dead, diseased, and dying wood, and try to keep that to this time of year. But if you're pruning your deciduous magnolia later in the season, when it's in full leaf at the end of the summer or high summer, try to keep that to a minimum, because magnolias don't really respond well to heavy pruning. They tend to throw up a lot of flushy growth, something we call epicormic, which is a response, a hormonal response by the plant, which is a sort of stress hormone, effectively, to try and put out as much new leaf that you've taken off already. So if you can, keep it to a minimum, and try to allow the magnolia to tell you what it wants to be like in terms of its structure, because they do tend to be a little bit multi-stemmed and multi-crossing. With that being said, I wouldn't be afraid of removing anything that's rubbing, or anything that's historically going to cause a problem in the future. So hopefully that answers your question. For all those that have just arrived, if you're interested in asking a question tonight, I'm the plant doctor. We're going to be here till about quarter to 7. Just take a look at the chat there. Post your question. Anything horticultural, we'll do our best to answer it. So our next question comes from Ginny, and hopefully, Ginny, you're here. It's lovely to see your pictures, and the progress that you've made with the memorial garden. We've been interested from the very beginning, and seen your beautiful gardens develop. Ginny is a volunteer at a memorial garden, and it's beautiful to see the progress that you've made with the resources that you have. And Ginny asks, at the memorial gardens where I volunteer, I want to create some small meadow wildlife areas. What would be the process from soil preparation, time of year, the best seed mix to buy, and ongoing maintenance? So it really depends on the size of the area you want to develop. If it's a very large area, then obviously seed is the way to go. If it's a very small area, you might be better to buy or grow on some perennial wildflower plugs. And I'm suggesting you use perennial wildflowers rather than the sort of chocolate box annuals, simply because they tend to have a greater wildlife benefit. A lot of the annual wildflowers will be wind pollinated, whereas the not all, but a lot of perennial wildflowers, things like primrose, for example, at this time of year, and will be a very early nectar source for wildlife, and they tend to do better in grass environments. But if you're doing a small area or a sort of medium-sized area, say 10 meters squared, or plus, generally what I do is try to remove the grass or rotivate the grass as organically as you can, really, which could be as simple as putting down some large sheets of plastic and allowing the grass to die off, in order that the wildflower mix that you're putting in, for example, a seed mix, will be able to germinate. Failing that, what I've done in the past is taken a turf cutter, which you can hire, and they're fairly easy to use. And what I've done is I've cut out an area, and it cuts it into rolls of turf that you might see when you go to the garden centre to buy turf. and you can take that down to say about 1/2 inch. So you're just taking off the very tip of the grass, the thatch underneath as well, which will also take away a lot of the nutrient, which is what you want. You don't want a highly rich or highly fertilized lawn area. What you want to do is provide an environment that is fairly low in nutrient, so that it keeps the grass species in check. So best time of year to do this, probably now, or you can leave it to September, October, when the ground is still warm and germination will still be good. So I would take off that turf or rotivate that turf. You can use the rolls of turf in a stack, and that will create beautiful loam for you in a few years, and that you can use on your plants. So you'd scatter that, you'd broadcast that at the right concentration of whatever the seed mix allows for. So you want to choose something that's a UK native wildflower mix, really, something with the grass seed mix included as well, rather than just wildflowers. And you want to look for something that's suited to your soil type. So often now, Johnson's, for example, is a very good make, and they have a range of seed mixes that are suitable for sort of heavy soils, shady areas, chalky areas, etc. So I would choose a thing that fits the site, but generally things with red clover, bird's foot trefoil, and crested dogtails grasses, oxeye daisy, things that have got a long season, that will be helpful for pollinating insects. So you'd create a fine tilth if you can with what you've got, broadcast the seed, and you'd firm that down, break it in gently, firm that down, you could tread it in gently, and then keep it watered until it germinates. And then following on from that ongoing maintenance, what you need to do is allow that grass to get to about 4 inches, which is easier said than done in an autumn sowing. But in the spring, what you want to do is probably mow that at a very high cut, just to keep the grasses in check while the other seeds germinate, which may be a little bit slower. But then ultimately what you'll need to do is mow very infrequently, probably once a year at the end of the season. So August, September, when the flowers have set seed and dropped their seed, so you've got more to look forward to next year. And what I would do is trim that or take that down, that grass, and then try to remove the grass so that you're taking away again a source of fertility of the soil. So I hope that is fairly comprehensive, but any more information, just let us know in the thing. If you need any more info, put it down in the app, and we'll do our best to answer any further questions or further information if I haven't been clear enough. We've got a question from Marshmallow that's coming, and it says, "Hi, I'm a volunteer at a community garden, and we want to create a bog garden in a neglected part of the garden, with the view to creating an area for kids to explore." So that's a really worthwhile activity. I remember it's a lovely thing to do, getting wet, getting muddy, and looking for insects. So I applaud your efforts. Obviously, it will depend on the soil, because traditionally what you want to avoid using, really, if you can, is plastics and things like that. But if you can use a recyclable plastic liner, or you've got a heavy clay soil, and then you may find that you've got pretty good water retention there. What I would do is, the kind of plants that you want to be using in those are what we would call marginals, bog plants, things that like very wet, clay, heavy soil. So what I would do is obviously take the area down, denude the area of nettles and things like that. It's a fairly neglected area. Excavate around it. You might find that the spoil from there is fairly useful as a surrounding of the area as well, which you can plant into, because obviously it will be the topsoil. And then you want to obviously see what the drainage is like, because obviously you want to contain the water there. But if you're using a butyl or a recycled liner, what you'll need to do is build some sort of surrounding and shelf to keep that water in, and allow for a smooth surface area into the water, so that it'll allow things like newts and other amphibians to get in and out quite easily. And then what I would do is have a look at our websites such as Crocus, and have a look at our bog plant range, What you want to do is use things that are good for ground cover, things that grow quickly, and things like primula, for example, the drum's head primula. So they look nice as well and have long season interest for pollinators. If you're using anything for the actual water itself, probably use things that are native rather than something ornamental like a water lily. So you could use things like water chestnut, shallow water perennials, for things like that, and they go on and on. And they provide nice, cool, sheltered areas for newts and amphibians and even fish ultimately. So yeah, I hope that gives you some pointers. Do let us know how you get on, and if you want any further points, we can link to certain things in the Iris app. If you're interested, we can do that later on or tomorrow, and we'll get back to you on that. But hopefully that gives you a few pointers. Can you recommend any interesting plants to include? So yeah, I would use things like hosta. I would use things like Primula beesiana, which is an easy one to remember, really good for bees. Primula beesiana, and the drum's head, candelabra type primulas, they're very good. I would use things like, let's have a look, and Lasagna, which is, you can get the goldenrod, which is very good for pollinators, which is a summer perennial with yellow spires. You could grow the Lasagna nummularia, which is the ground covering Lasagna as well. So plenty of options. Also have a look on, as I say, on our Crocus website, and we should have a range of plants there for you. Hopefully that gives you some information. George has asked, what can I do to bring some of my houseplants out of their dormant winter state? Well, we don't want to force them into leaf or growth. What we want to do is let nature take its course. And I know sun and warmth and spring has been in short supply lately. But what you can do, obviously, over the winter, a lot of houseplants will be in a state of low growth or dormancy. And what we want to do is encourage them into leaf and flower. But what we need to do is probably, as the next few weeks, you'll probably notice things, the light has changed. It's getting earlier in the morning and staying lighter in the evenings. And plants will be recognizing this day length change. And what we'll probably need to do is increase the watering slightly, and then have a think about some dilute fertilizer, some plant fertilizer, specific perhaps to the actual plant that you're growing. Generally, it's about a sort of a baby bio type liquid fertilizer we're interested in. But generally, what we'll need to do is make sure that they have the right environment. So whether that be something with a bit of a high humidity, make sure they're getting the light that they need, and just generally checking that perhaps the compost needs refreshing at this time of year. Have a look at the roots. Do they need a trim, for example, or do they need potting up? Fresh new compost will encourage a lot of plants to put out new growth, and then further root growth will encourage further leaf growth. So hopefully that will stimulate the growth for you, George. Okay, just one that was posted earlier. Again, if you're here just at the moment, I'm Crocus Plant Doctor. If you just arrived fairly soon, we're going to carry on for a little bit, answering some of your questions from the Iris app, which is a pleasure to support you in that. And also, if you'd like to pose any questions, then pop them into the YouTube chat, which is just on, or it's on my right. So hopefully it's the same for you. And we'll answer as many as we can this evening. Another one that came in from Grace Meridew. So hi, Grace, if you're here. When is the ideal time to prune my rose bushes? Well, traditionally, if you look at the RHS, they'll say November to March. And generally, I'm an advocate of later is better, simply because you can see what you're doing and where the buds are. And my rose is just starting to come out. I've got a nice climbing Etoile de Hollande rose, which is gorgeous red flowering, very heavily scented climber, and it's starting to show. So it's very easy to find out where the live buds are, where the dead, diseased, and dying branches are. And it means that anything later than this, really, if you're leaving it too late, if you're leaving it into April and May, you're taking off viable wood that could be used. The energy of that's been put into that could have been used to promote the flowers and give you better blooms. Any earlier, and if you've suffered, or if you're in an area that's prone to severe or prolonged frosts, you can get a bit of dieback, and that can be discouraging. So I tend to be later. One point where I would probably prune earlier is if you've got some quite wayward or old hybrid teas or floribundas that are quite tall and prone to windrock. And if you've been anything like me, I'm in the Midlands. You can tell from my accent, but I'm in Worcestershire, and it's been very windy this year, which I'm sure has been the same for you. And windrock can be a real problem. So if you've got tall roses, then it may be better to prune earlier in the season, but generally during the dormant period, November to March. So hopefully that answers your question. That's great. We've got one more from the pre-questions, and I'll answer a few more in the chat then. We've got Louis 2016. Hi Louis, if you're here. I have a lovely cavalier. If you're as old as me, that could be a dog or a car. Yeah, okay. That's partial to a pansy or two. So I'm mindful of what I plant. Can you suggest a tallish plant to put in a pot and some bedding plants? It seems that all the plants I seem to look at are toxic to dogs. Well, I hear you, and I've got a cat, so it's similar situation. It chews everything. What I would say is that, if I don't mind me plugging our partner website, Crocus, we're one of the few sites to actually list any toxicities, pets or otherwise, on our plant cards, our plant website. So you can be assured that we'll have double checked with the Dogs Trust, we'll have double checked toxicity with Horticultural Trades Association and the Cats Protection League. So we do all that research for you. And I'd say we're always 100%, but generally these are the things that we note down if there are any problems with plants for you. So it's worth having a look on our website to see if the plants have any toxicity associated with them. So plug over. What I would do is take the view of, are you looking, what I would say to want to look at the deterrents, and can you barrier off or guide off the dog from that area so that you can actually plant what you want there. Toxic doesn't necessarily mean poisonous. It can just mean unpalatable. But obviously we don't want the dog poorly. So that would be one area I'd be looking at in terms of, can you do anything to stop the dog from that area, first of all? Secondly, I'd probably be looking at the plant choice of plants. And again, these could be a deterrent, but they don't have to be a toxic deterrent. They could be something that dogs don't particularly like. So something like Melissa lemon balm, for example, if you're growing that in bedding, dogs don't tend to like lemon balm very much. Melissa officinalis. You could use, as a specimen, as a dot plant, you could use something that's non-toxic like a cordyline, which is very strap-like leaves. I'm sure a lot of people will know what a cordyline is. Almost like a sort of cabbage palm, I think, is the common name. You could use heuchera, which is a beautiful foliage plant, again non-toxic, and that fits in very well with they're happy with pots. For bedding, you could use things like busy lizzies, antirrhinum snapdragons. What else could you use? Let me have a think. Calendula marigolds. They're edible. But not palatable, but it's just edible. You can eat the flowers. So hopefully those are non-toxic options for you. Strawberries you could even use as well. Dogs don't tend to go for fruit, so that could be an option. Herbs as well. Anything strongly scented might keep the cavalier at bay. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so that's some of our pre-questions away. If you've just joined us today, thank you very much. Tonight, I'm Crocus Plant Doctor. I look after and support you on the Iris app. I'm part of a small core team that is happy to be part of this lovely, growing, safe community. We enjoy reading all your posts, and we enjoy seeing all your wonderful pictures and all of your IDs as well. That keeps us on our toes. So thank you very much for that. If you have any questions, by all means pop them in the chat, in the YouTube chat here. And if you're happy and having a good time, we could probably do something like this again, and let us know at the end or through the RS app if this has been useful. Perhaps putting a face to the name has been quite helpful. As I'm just one of the plant doctors here. We've got a small core team behind the scenes that also interact with you as well. And so we're all very happy, knowledgeable bunch, hopefully, also learning from you. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the questions that have come through on the chat, which I can see. Thank you very much, Marsh, for your comments. Thank you. Hopefully that's been helpful. We've just come up with, I'm just thinking, just a couple more for your bog garden idea. Things like a chorus, Japanese rush would be good. Things like mentha, water mint. Those are excellent choices for pollinators. So those are another couple for you. Thank you, George, for your comments. That's very kind of you. We've got a question here from Ben. Ben, nice to see you. When is the best time to cut my grass? The weather is slowly warming up, and that kicks off the season for me. What comes next to making my garden a sanctuary? Well, I know my grass is growing. I generally try to get a couple of cuts in before No Mow May. No Mow May is an initiative where we try to keep our grass uncut or minimally cut during May to keep pollinators happy. We also shows you where the weeds are. Weeds are just wildflowers growing in the wrong place, obviously. But what I would do is probably leave it a little longer, literally, but take it down in stages so that you're not shaving the grass all in one go. So really you want a dry day that's probably followed some wind, just for ease of use, for ergonomics, so you don't block your mower. Always best to have a look at your mower before you take it out. So do a bit of a service on it, make sure everything's working fine. You know how to use it again, and you've got the petrol's correct and all the rest of it. There's plenty of oil in it. But I would take generally a high cut first of all, and literally just take the tips off. And what that will do is that will tell the grass basically to tiller, which is put out sidewards shoots, and that's what thickens up your lawn. If you take it off too much in one go, it tends to throw up upward growth and not put out and not stimulate tiller growth. So that's what I would do. I would probably in the next week or two, when the weather's just a little bit better, take off the tips, probably something at around 2 to 3 inches. I think that's about right for now. And that cut comes down as we get closer to sort of May and June. So hopefully that's been helpful for you. Okay. Priya has asked the question, can you tell me when is the best time to move hostas from containers to the border? I think pretty much any time, as long as the ground isn't waterlogged or frozen. Hostas are fully hardy. What you may find is that if your garden is fairly bare at the moment and you're putting hostas out, that's a pretty good advertisement. It's a Michelin star advertisement for slugs and snails. So probably what I would do is do something perhaps in April. But you can plant them out now. It all depends on how much other foliage you've got around you and what sort of defences you have or barriers you have to those sort of molluscs that are wandering the garden as the soil warms up. But as far as I know, all hostas are fully hardy in this country, so should be able to tolerate any late frosts. So you should be good to go. We've got another question from Josie. Hi, Josie. When is it safe to cut back my hydrangea limelight ready for the new season's growth? Okay. Probably what I would do is leave it a little bit longer. Hydrangeas, some of the hydrangeas are coming into leaf now, the macrophyllars, but paniculatas in particular are very late into leaf. And they can be as late as sort of early May, depending on how the weather's been. And generally what we advise with most hydrangeas is that you're leaving the flowers on over the winter, both as architectural interest, food for birds, for example, and insects, and also just to create a little bit of frost protection, because they're terminal flowers and the buds and growth buds form beneath them. And those often aren't visible for a few more weeks. So I'd generally be pruning those back, generally after flowering, if I'm to be honest. But if you're giving them a light trim, certainly you'd be taking the heads off this time of year, probably taking them back a few inches to a strong growing point if you can find them, but nothing too drastic. So that would be more of those. And thank you very much for your comments. We enjoy these Q&As too. Well, we will, you know, I am at the moment. I hope you are too. It's lovely to see so many of you. Hopefully you able to put a face to the name. If you want to ask any questions, as I say, we'll get through to them, and we will. You can post them in the chat here, and we'll get round to them. Pauline's asked a question, asking if she can top an ornamental cherry and when. So cherry's a little bit like the magnolia question we had earlier. They can bleed if cut too early. And generally what we would advise with most woody plants, including cherries, is that you prune them generally after flowering and do it at that point. Or if you're doing a sort of a winter formative prune, not to take too much off. Otherwise, you'll stimulate this thicket of growth that you'll end up having to deal with later on. It's generally unproductive, unfruit-worthy wood, and that would be my thing. So I think if you're taking, it depends on how old and mature the cherry is. If it's showing pruning, regrowth from pruning last year, then I would take it back to the first couple of buds, so that you've left a nice little sort of peg. But probably best to leave things till after flowering, so you probably haven't got too long to wait, a couple of months, and just take out the 3 Ds, as I said, this dead, diseased, and dying wood. That can be taken out, and you can probably see a little bit more of the fruiting wood underneath. So hopefully that's answered your question there. We've got one from Jan. Hi, Jan. I planted hellebores this year when they were first available. I think maybe September, but had no flowers. Is this normal? They don't seem to be growing particularly well. Okay, it may depend on the maturity of the hellebore. If you bought them in, say, a 9 centimetre square or a litre pot, it may be that they just need some additional time and additional maturity to put out buds. Obviously, hellebores are sort of late winter flowering plants. Planting them in September is a good idea. That's given the roots time to establish. They're very much like a shady or light shaded location with plenty of humus, so plenty of organic matter put into around them, generally with a nice thick 1 or 2 inch layer of mulch to help the weeds down, sealing the moisture and feed the soil. And generally they like they're sort of a woodland marginal, so they tend to throw up their flowers first and then put out their leaves later. As to why they haven't flowered, it could be a maturity issue. Could be that they this year, perhaps if it was a dry area, even if you're a particularly dry area, make sure that the soil's kept moist. That might be a moot point over the winter. It's been very wet here in Worcestershire. But generally, I wouldn't overfeed them, but I would generally allow them to moist, organic, rich, heavy soils. That's what in a shady spot, a lightly shaded spot, would be the ideal thing. So hopefully you've got a spot, and it's just the fact that they're a little bit too young to be flowering at this time. Hopefully that will give you some pointers. Sorry, I can't be more specific. Okay. Chris has asked a question, or as pointed out, very good point, to check for frogs before mowing. There are many moving about at the moment. Absolutely right. Very wet ground. First time you've noticed, and you probably walked on your lawn perhaps this year. So excellent point there, Chris. Take care as you're mowing. Keep an eye out for any invertebrates or others that are using your lawn as their pathways over the winter. Excellent. Holly's asked a question. Hi, Holly. Nice to see you. I tried to grow tomatoes on my balcony last year. Had loads of leaves, but no fruit. Any tips? So tomatoes generally okay in pots, as long as they've got plenty of light. What I would do is make sure if you're feeding them at all, which we recommend probably every week or every 2 weeks, with a high potassium feed, so a tomato feed, something that hasn't got a lot of nitrogen in it, basically, or balanced between the three elements that are good for growth, so nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. So that would be something I'd look at. Plenty of leaves but no flowers, or no fruit, perhaps. Perhaps they did flower and they didn't set fruit. So if they're generally wind pollinated, and what you can do is, and what some of the breeders do, is get a paintbrush and dab that in the actual plants themselves. They're self-fertile, and you can dab the pollen all the way around and do the jobs of the insects if you think you're lacking in that area on your balcony, or if you're in your raised area. I'm guessing you don't say whether they're cordons or trailing varieties, upright or whatever, but I think perhaps what we try to do is they'll generally set up trusses of flowers, and we generally pinch out the top at about 5 or 6 trusses, and those should generally set fruit. So I hope you have better success this year with those few tips, and best of luck with that. Let us know how you get on. Okay, the next question. Priya's asked again about tomatoes. What are we looking for when they say pinch out bits? I'm never sure what to pinch out on them. That's absolutely fine. So tomatoes, if they're grown, some of the tomato varieties, some of the common ones, things like Gardener's Delight, Alicante, some of the beefsteak varieties, they're cordons. So that means that they grow very, very upright, and they grow on trusses that come out between the leaf axils, the leaf joints, for example. And what we want to try and do is pinch out anything that isn't going to be productive. The plant, making flowers and fruit is very expensive for plants. And what we want to do is make sure all of the energy goes into there. And they put out a lot of leaves already, and we don't want to encourage that. And so what we want to do is, if you're growing one of these cordon varieties, which is a common thing, is that you're normally growing them on a stake or a wire, for example. And what you want to do is pinch out any of the side growths, any of the side shoots that are coming out from the leaf buds there. So all the energy is going into the central leader, and that's where all the hormones and the growth hormones are. So the plant will grow up quite quickly, and it'll set out another set of leaves, and then it'll try again to set out another pair of buds, growth buds, and you leave those till you can pinch them out. And basically what you're trying to do is get it to its starting flowering, and then allow it to flower on 4 or 5 trusses. And then at the very top, what you want to do is pinch out the very top, and that's sort of saying enough. That's probably at about 5 or 6 feet generally. And some of the commercial varieties that you see in commercial glasses grow up to 8 or 9 feet, but they're growing in sort of rocket fuel in order for them to do that. So pinching out is really taking out the things that you don't need, or the plant. You want to control the growth of the plant and where it puts its energy, which is where we want to put its energy into the flowers and the fruit. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay. Lovely to see you all. Let's have a look. Thank you very much, Josie. Enjoying these Q&A. Thank you very much. Hopefully you're enjoying the iris community. It's something that we've tried to promote as a sort of safe, supportive, friendly gardening community. There are experts in there. not covering myself here. There are experts in there, and they're very, very much beginners in there. And we want that to be a very much a sort of as if you're talking to a friend over a garden hedge. That's the kind of thing we're going for in terms of that sort of community feel. And hopefully you enjoy looking at the posts as much as we do. We love seeing your photos. We love seeing spring in warmer parts of the country, and autumn in northern parts of the country. So we get a real feel for the content that you like to see. Hopefully the articles that you see as well, and the information that we can provide, benefits you. And we are molded very much by what we see and what we read and what we look at as well. And we look at every one of your posts, and we try to you'll see our comments, some of the things, but sometimes our regulars, shall we say, post so quickly and so accurately that we're very much in the sidelines, which helps us out enormously. And I'll be the first to admit that sometimes some of the ideas stump me, and I get to look at them on a desktop. And you poor people just have to look at them on the mobile, and sometimes I'm stumped. So it takes a little bit of time, but sometimes you come through and answer the questions for us, which is brilliant, because one person can't know everything. So it's lovely to see. We've got people that are very keen on succulents, know a lot about that. We've got very keen gardeners, keen allotment growers, people that are taking this on their journey, through their sort of their allotment journey. We love to see those. We get beautiful sunsets. We get cats. We get dogs. We get insects. We like them all. And hopefully the weather and spring will arrive shortly, and it will be all guns blazing on showing us all these beautiful pictures that you'll show everybody. We've got one from Colby. Hi, Colby. And Colby has an alocasia, which is I think it's elephant ears. Sometimes I get begonia mixed up with that. And it's an indoor houseplant with very sort of very large shield-like leaves, very heavily ribbed shield-like leaves. And Cole is saying that they've got a problem with their alocasia silver dragon. So it's a lovely cultivar of alocasia, which has started to get strange orangey yellow blotches around the leaf margins. And I sympathise, because I've got the same on my peperomia, which is a similar kind of foliage plant, indoor house plant. And broadly, plants only have a limited way of showing you what's wrong with them. I don't know whether a plant doctor is harder than a real doctor. Probably don't have to study for as long. But a human doctor can find out where it hurts, whereas a plant doctor has a limited. Plants have a limited way of showing you, and generally, yellow margins in houseplants can be a number of things. So it can be a case of process of elimination, but generally it's showing some sort of stress, and the stress is generally environmental or root. Okay, so generally, if it's a houseplant in the winter, and I'm guilty of this, it could well be that the plant is slightly overwatered. And it shows at the tips, because these are very fine capillaries, and they're the closest area to dry out as well. So if you have low humidity and the plant enjoys a high humidity, especially with dry central heating, for example, you could find that the plant doesn't instantaneously tell you it doesn't like it, but over time, the humidity in that area could be poor. So that's one option. Slight overwatering could be another, and that the only test really to tell would be to take it out of its pot and have a look how wet the roots are. If I was to see large blotchy patches with yellow markings around them like a halo, that would definitely be signs of root problems, generally caused by overwatering, or a build-up of salts used from tap water. So generally what I would advise is using a tepid rainwater if you can, to really spoil your houseplants. And as I mentioned earlier, we're getting to spring, so plants will probably be needing a little bit more water than they were regularly. But generally, that's a sign of root stress. So that could be a process of elimination to find out whether it's humidity-based. Is it the water that you're using? Is it too much water? Could it be a fungal issue, which is often caused a fungal leaf spot issue? It's generally what I would do is I wouldn't spray anything. What I would do is see if you can ameliorate the humidity and the watering issue, bring it into a slightly brighter location, but out of full sunlight if it's an alocasia, and see if that improves or at least holds the situation, in which case you've probably cracked it. What I would do is allow more leaves to develop before you take off any unsightly leaves, because the leaf that you've got on looks quite healthy apart from the margins, and that will help to dry out the plant. Plants lose water through their leaves, and if you're taking away the leaves that are blotchy, for example, you're taking away its capacity to pump water away quickly. So hopefully that gives you some indication. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Hopefully that gives you some points. Holly's asked another question. My snowdrops still haven't flowered. Is this due to the weather? Generally, snowdrops and bulbs will come up, and I was going to ask you a question, or maybe ask it now. When do you think spring arrives? Does it arrive with snowdrops, or does it arrive with things that are sort of later on in the year after meteorological spring? But generally, spring has been arriving earlier and earlier, as we know, with climate change. But generally, plants and bulbs have adapted to this. And generally, even if the weather has been cold, that won't affect when the plants come out. In fact, cold is very good for bulbs. It creates particular chemicals that create flowering initials inside the bulb ready to go. In fact, cold temperatures are actually needed for this. So having a very, very mild or warm winter usually means you've got a bad bulb harvest or a bad bulb show. Generally, bulbs, as long as they've been well drained, haven't been eaten by rodents, or the ground hasn't been solidly frozen, depending on where you are, Holly, generally they'll pull through. I would say if you haven't had any flowering at the moment, then probably the opportunity's passed for this year. It may be that this blindness, which is how we describe bulbs that don't come up and have flowers, whether or not you've got them the right depth. Generally, bulbs are planted at 2.5 times their depth, something like that as a rule of thumb. So probably something in the order of 8 to 10 centimeters deep for snowdrops. You could try planting them in the green, which is where you buy plants later on after they flowered, and you plant them at the correct depth of the nursery mark. And that's always a good option if you're finding that your bulbs are getting eaten by rodents, for example. But generally what I would do is make sure that they're planted at the right depth, make sure they've got enough light. They're a woodland plant ultimately, but make sure they're not overshaded by evergreen plants, because they'll be forming in they'll have evolved from deciduous woodland, so on the forest floors of beech forests, for example, or oak forests. So hopefully that gives you some commiserations. Okay. A couple more before we finish. Jan has asked another question. Lasagna planted some containers, and they are fabulous at the moment. What do I do when they are finished? So lasagna planting bulbs are where you create an effect in a large or deep pot, and you plant at different depths. And you plant the bigger bulbs at the bottom. So you might plant daffodils at the bottom, and then you might plant tulips in another layer above. You put another layer of compost, and then another layer of tulips, and then perhaps something like Glory of the Snow or Crocus on the top. So that's a lasagna effect. So basically you get a succession of flowers and bulbs, and sometimes you get them all at once, which makes for something that's quite dramatic. But the question of what to do with them afterwards, generally what I do is I'll probably take them out and split them up and see if you can use them again somewhere else in the garden, rather than keep them in the pot and try to get the same effect. Generally, bulbs are best in their first year, except when they're planted out again, where they can naturalize. So that's what I would do. I would take them out, probably leave all the foliage to die back, and then you've got the pot to use for the summer. So that's what I would do, I think. FM Eskita, hopefully I've pronounced your name. Thank you, lovely to see you here. I live in an apartment and I have a small garden above a garage. It has 30 centimetres of soil and faces north. What can I plant that is low maintenance and visually appealing? Well, we have, if I can plug our Crocus website, we do have filter pages on our plants, and roof gardens are one of the options that you can use there to get a feel for what the site really has. So you could put in a north facing and roof garden site, for example. So you're looking for things that will tolerate shade, but things like helichrysum would do well as well. You've got the plant that would do quite well there. So have a look at our roof garden options there. You won't basically want things that are fairly shallow rooted because you've got 30 centimetres to play with. So you're probably going to be restricted to sort of ground cover shrubs, perennials, bulbs, some of the smaller bulbs, for example. In terms of low maintenance plants for north areas, things like heucheras, hellebores. Trying to think of anything beyond the H at the moment. There seems to be a lot of that in spring. Let's have a look. Our other plant doctor has put in a link for you there, which has saved the old grey matter from thinking about the plants. But basically, you're looking for things that do well in shady locations. So you're looking at evergreens, things that woodland plants, Brunera, Bergenia is very good. Berberis would do very well as well. Has a beautiful autumn colour, deciduous shrub. Those are a few pointers for you, and hopefully you'll have a look at the link in the chat there that the plant doctors put in for me. And save the old grey matter from scratching again. But if you want any more advice on that, we'll certainly get back to you, post in the Iris app, and we'll come up with a few more options for you off the spot. Okay, thank you, Holly. Absolutely, Iris is so supportive. We're glad you think so. We enjoy seeing you, so to speak. And I know we've got quite a few regulars now, but we love reading all of you and seeing what you've done. You're very welcome. We've had a lot of interaction this evening. That's very, very good. Just one more question from Ben, I think, before we finish. What would you say is the must-have flower this season? I want to impress my neighbour, and you have a 20% off sale this weekend. Thank you for plugging us. We do indeed, and I think that's across the board. What I would say is, that's like asking which is your favourite child. The must-have plant for the season. For this season, I'm guessing for springtime. I mean, you can't beat primroses at the moment, peonies. You've got things to look forward to that you need to buy now, obviously, like dahlias, agapanthus. How long have you got? We could go on all night. But things that are that speak summer and UK, UK summer to us, red, white, and blue. Perhaps we've got a few anniversaries this year of national importance, so perhaps something popular, but something perennially popular, if I can use that pun, like Salvia caradonna, for example, Stipa tenuissima, the horsetail grass, pony's tail grass. That always does well. Plenty of salvias come to mind. Honorine Joubert, the Japanese anemone, always a great seller, a great plant to use. That's a great late summer flower. Does very well in most soils. So hopefully those are a few topics. Yeah, so hopefully you've enjoyed this Q&A. Let us know in the app if you'd like to see more, and we will get back to you. Let us know what you think of the app. we always listen to your feedback. There'll be spaces to do that at various times through the year. We love seeing your photos. We love going through your photos to pick out some that were our favourites from last year. So please continue to do that. We love all your plant related content. We love the way you're supportive. It spurs us on. It inspires us as much as you. And that's very kind. And thank you very much for all the nice comments about tonight and the app in general. And we look forward to seeing you in the app very soon. So with that, I will say a good night and happy planting. Bye-bye.